Great. Good afternoon, everyone. It is Wednesday, January 17th at 4 o'clock, and I'm officially convening the meeting for the Code and Charter Review Committee. We are at the Dewey Beach Life Saving Station and via Zoom, and this meeting is being conducted in accordance with the state of Delaware requirements. Let's first start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United
States of
America, to the republic,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So thanks, everyone. I know it's a cold, sunny day. We'll start with a roll call. So Marcia?
Here.
Jimmy
O'Connor here.
Elaine, via Zoom.
Elaine Ball here.
Thank you, Elaine. Town officials and myself, that's Dave Lyons. Town officials, Dawn Hanks.
Yes.
Okay. Bill Zoper.
Yep.
And Commissioner Persinger.
Hello.
All right. Have I missed anyone? Okay. So the first item on the agenda today is to adopt it. So can I get a motion to adopt today's agenda?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Marcia.
I'll second.
Thank you, Jimmy. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The next item is to approve the minutes from November 28th. Are there any comments or questions on those minutes? Nope. Okay. Can I get a motion to approve them? Go ahead, Marcia.
Motion.
Thank you. Second. Thanks, Jimmy. All in favor? Aye. All right. Okay. At this point in the agenda, it calls for opening public comments. What I'm going to do as we proceed here is I'm going to open the comments as we come to each agenda item. On the detail items, we'll open up to the public, get everyone's comments, and we'll go from there. So the next thing we're going to do is, any comments from any of the committee members at this point? Anybody want to bring anything up? No? No. Okay. All right, then we'll move on to the first item, which is to discuss and possibly vote to recommend to the town commissioners amendments to the following sections of the town charter. So Commissioner Persinger, where we left this, if you recalls, is Commissioner Persinger was going to come back and review some of these for us, make some recommendations. And just to kind of, we can decide then if we can come to some concurrence in terms of making a recommendation to the commissioners. On the first item, I just want to mention, we have talked about LLCs before as a group, and we know it's a complicated issue. I'll use those words. So I don't want to get bogged down on revisiting this before. I think we have kind of a concurrence on this. What we discussed in the past was that this probably needed to go back to some kind of a referendum for the town to decide. Commissioner Persinger, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Just by way of background, I think we should all be reminded that this was a set of proposed amendments that largely came from Mayor Stevens, who had an inordinate amount of time at some point to go through the charter and highlight some of these issues. We don't have a particular position. Bill doesn't have any positions on it specifically. I don't have a specific position on it. This is really for the committee to consider. If you want to take a position, fine. If you want to refer it back to the town commissioners for further action or further analysis, that's fine. Or on any of these things, if you don't really feel, technically qualified to come up with a definitive position, it's fair to say you certainly could kind of give us a feel for how you think things ought to work, even if you don't have in mind all of the technical details associated with any of these issues. With that as an introduction, I would invite you to go ahead and start discussing these items.
Okay. So on this first item, I'll lead off and then I'll ask for everyone else, but I do feel it's kind of a complicated issue. It's a fundamental change, and my recommendation would be to send it back to the commissioners with the thought of some kind of a public referendum would be required, if we want to make a comment at all. So I'm going to go around. Elaine, do you have any?
I totally agree. Workshop and a public, it's too big of an issue to us to just pass along. So I agree exactly with what you're saying, David, and from your comments in the minutes last time. about the other issue.
Great, thank you. Marcia
Agree,
concurs?
same.
Jim?
We're doing section 10, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. And I agree, yes.
yeah, we're doing section 10, excuse me. Okay. All right, so with that, I'm just going to get a motion.
Is the only part of that, the LLC part, the only question really that we're worried about? Is that part of the qualification, the voter qualification?
It says the issue that was described here is expanding voting rights to a member of the LLC, LLP, or a corporation by adding the paragraph above. So the paragraph above would give 2 votes per entity.
Good.
Okay, all right. So can I get a motion that will defer this to the commissioners and recommend a public workshop and a referendum?
You have,
All right.
all
All right, Lynn, I'm gonna, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
You got, Lane, Marcia, you in favor?
yes, aye.
Okay, great. Okay, let's move on to section 16, which is responsibilities of the town manager. I'm not gonna read the whole section, but the question here is, should parking administration be added to the list of responsibilities? Commissioner Persinger, did you have any thoughts on this?
No, again, this is just for your thoughts. I mean, we might want to hear from the town manager in terms of whether he thinks there's a gap here that needs to be filled.
Bill?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. So it was brought to my attention that certain resolutions were passed in the past by other mayors, and then rescinded by other mayors, and never enforced. So some of the parking areas around town that very early on in Dewey's history, mayor passed with the commissioners a resolution saying that so many parking spots would be provided to certain property owners that were in the public right of way. Did some research with Dawn and found that some of those were rescinded later by a mayor and other commissioners, but they were never enforced. So I brought that to the commissioners for their attention and asked them, currently there's a resolution that says one thing, but the town's allowing something else to happen. So that's how this kind of came about. Do they want to just, instead of it going back to the commissioners and them voting on it, or do they just want to let me make the decision without it coming to the commissioners and being voted on it? And that's, Commissioner Persinger, the way I think this was highlighted for the committee.
Okay, that's good. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. I'll go around comments.
So I'm aware of, over the years, that happening, and have been at those meetings, and I really think we need consistency in that. So I would like it to be in a place where it's not subjective or personal in terms of what commission's in.
Yeah.
And I think for that reason, I think we need to put it in the office of the town manager, because, as you know, offering public parking spaces to private individuals, one commission, then a rescinding, and then offering it back, not only is it subjective and not properly fair, it's also puts us in a pretty bad legal position too.
Right, I agree. Jim?
I think it should be enforced by them, so it should be put in.
Yep.
Bill can't have it and Tom can. It's not fair. No matter how long they've lived here.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Blaine?
I agree.
Okay.
It should be the town manager.
Okay. So then can I get a motion that we recommend to the commissioners that parking administration be added to the list of responsibilities for the town manager?
I'll make a motion that Bill's in charge of everything.
Everyone else want to give Bill more responsibility? I'll make a motion. Hey, Bill, my car needs to be washed.
I'll make a
Second.
motion that Bill take over the parking administration.
Okay.
Having to do with parking spaces throughout town.
Okay. Yep, I'm going to say parking administration will be added to the town manager's responsibilities. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Okay, we'll move on to section 17, which is relates to the audit committee and auditors. The issue there was, does the audit committee need explicit authority to release the audit firm from a multi-year contract as was recently necessary? And I could use some background on this.
So, Mr. Chair, I can provide background. So
Great.
our past audit company decided they no longer wanted to do the audit on the town of Dewey Beach and asked to get out of the contract. So after speaking with legal counsel and also speaking with folks that were speaking with the chair of the audit committee, decision was made by the town manager to go ahead and let them out of their 3-year contract. We had to put an RFP back out, put it back out to bid, and only one company put in for it, and then we went and accepted that, and they are currently doing our audits.
Okay.
My thinking on that was, if the company didn't want to do our audit,
Right.
how hard do we want to push them to stay in the contract? So I just, at that time, after talking to our attorney, Fred Townsend, he said, after reading through our code, that the town manager could make that decision. This would take that decision away from me and give it back to, give it to the audit committee, so they would make that decision instead of the town manager.
What was the reason?
Individual that was doing our audit was leaving that company, and the company didn't want to continue with the town of Dewey Beach if that person wasn't here to do the audit.
Any other thoughts around? Okay, Commissioner Bersinger?
Yeah, just a question to Bill Zolper. Doesn't the contract with the audit firm have provisions for termination, either termination by the audit firm or by the town? And-
Yes, either one could terminate it on an agreement.
Okay. So the question is, do we really need more? Does the audit committee have to have a role here? I'm not sure. And if you think they do, then how would you better define it?
Yeah.
There's a company currently doing audit right now, correct?
Yes,
And we were happy with them,
yes.
let the other one go out of
Well,
the contract.
No, he did. I guess the question.
I did make that decision after the advice of our town attorney,
Right. So,
based on the contract that we signed.
right. If I'm understanding the issue, it's who should have the responsibility for terminating the who makes that final decision? Is it the audit committee or is it the town manager? I think that's where we're getting to. So is there?
He's in charge.
Right. So,
Comment?
yeah, comment.
Again, I think we're all volunteer committees, and I think it's an administrative
Right.
decision, and it takes it out of the subjective, personal type of decision-making. And no, it's a business decision
Right.
with the operations of the town.
I agree. I agree.
We can only hope that our next town manager is as good as this one. I hate to.
I just signed a 3-year contract, so I'm
I know, that's
here.
why we're
all
pumping
these,
up.
all these abilities to a town manager and then have Bill go on in 5 years and town, a new town manager. We've had bad ones in the past.
Right.
Have too much power. So for now,
Elaine?
That particular situation seemed to be what was built to do. They wanted to leave. They do have a clause to get out of their agreement. But the language, does the audit committee need explicit authority to release the audit firm from a multi-year contract as was recently necessary? I guess the question is, in these years, in the last 15, 20 years of being in Dewey, sometimes people have complained about the auditors getting rid of a perfectly good auditor. So does this give the audit committee, as I think Marcia was saying, that maybe we don't want to put this language in again, and it should be, I'm torn with this, to be honest with you. I'm not going to be very clear, because you want to have oversight of the audit committee over the town manager a bit, right? Just as Jimmy was saying, you don't always know if you're going to have the best town manager, but at the same token, you don't want the audit committee dismissing an auditor for no good reason. So are we?
I think there's probably, I mean, I would imagine there's probably contractual language that can't happen anyway. So I think this was unique that, you know, the individual left and they didn't want to continue, and I don't really think it's good business that we force someone to continue. And I go back to just saying, I think it's an administrative decision.
Right. I agree. I think it's more of an administrative decision than a committee decision, especially since there could be some legal impacts in it. So, Elaine, how does that?
I'm still not 100% convinced that there isn't a time that the audit committee might serve a role in oversight of the town manager. Not you, Bill, of course, but do you see that ever being a situation, Bill?
So for hiring the audit company, the RFP goes out and the audit committee reviews it and the audit committee votes on that company. Okay, so that's the hiring part. This situation was the company wanted to leave us, and I had to make a decision. As I said, I had the town attorney review the contract, and he said I could make the decision, so I did, and I let the chair of the audit committee know.
Right. There's nothing in here currently, if I understand this, there's nothing in the charter here that says how it can be terminated, how a contract can be terminated, at least around audit, from this paragraph that I've got. So I think, is it appropriate to just have a means to terminate a contract, at least for audit, since let's not open the whole can of worms here, but is there a problem? I guess, Elaine, you're not comfortable with it?
I don't know. I mean, there's times where the power of the town manager and to manage the overall budget, not that perhaps some oversight. And I guess the question was, if there was a step that someone or something complained about, or that it had to go in front of the audit committee first for you to release the even though they wanted to be released. Is that what happened, Bill?
So the company said they no longer wanted to do the audit, but they were signed for a 3-year contract. And in the contract, it said if both parties agreed to release them, we could release them. So that's what I did after I spoke with the town attorney.
Let me see if I can offer a compromise here. If the town manager were to have the lead, but be responsible to inform the audit committee and confer with them before somebody was terminated, is that a check and balance there? That in this specific case, they didn't want it, but if Bill had said, hey, look, this company wants to be let go, it sat down with the audit committee or the lead and said, look, they want to be terminated, there's no sense keeping them. Are you in agreement that we terminate them and find somebody else? There's a check and balance lane that I think you're looking for. I think it might be a good compromise.
Yeah, and I recognize that sometimes this stuff has to, if they're not going to do it, you could force them, but you also have to get the ball rolling, and going through a committee can take time, and time that you don't have. But checks and balances is the word, the phrase I guess I was looking at or thinking about. So I don't have a strong position on, I have a position on it, but I don't know what the alternative is.
Well, how about if we were to put in here, make the recommendation, the commissioners can change it, but that we authorize the town manager to terminate the contract with agreement from the audit committee, or in concurrence with the concurrence of the audit committee.
I think that's what caused the problem last time, that he didn't go. Isn't that what caused the problem last time, Bill? That you didn't go through the audit committee and you just went ahead and the attorney said that you could do it?
It didn't, there was no issue. It's just been brought up
Right.
in case charter code thinks I shouldn't have the ability to do that. I don't care either way. I talked to the attorney said I could do it, so I did it.
So I think the issue is there's nothing in the charter that kind of manages a termination of a contract. I think that's what we're trying to get here, is there's no process to do that. And so we're trying to come up with who is the first, what is the process? So if it starts with Bill, and Bill confers with the audit committee, and with their concurrence, Bill can terminate the contract. Because if the audit committee disagrees, well, then it's going to get raised up from there.
Sure. So the ultimate
Well-
decision falls with the town manager.
Right.
After concurring
With the concurrence of the audit committee.
Does that, would that have caused any negative impact if there were delays for having to publicly notice a meeting, convene a meeting? Let's just say worst case scenario, there's not a quorum, it's the middle of winter, we have an auditor that doesn't want to participate in the process. Would that have caused?
It could, because the
Setback.
audit is a lot of work. It's months in the undertaking from our financial person providing all the information. And then all our town employees, at least the department heads, and our commissioners have to fill out paperwork every year and submit. It's a long process. It takes up a lot of time. So there could be some issues if you can't get to it quickly. I mean, I could ask the chair to hurry up and call a meeting. We'd have to post it 7 days out, have it noticed, and do it as quickly as possible. But yeah, it could be a problem.
I just kind of feel like when we're dealing with something with our day-to-day,
Yeah.
year-over-year financials, and we've got a delay where they do not want to be with us in this scenario. And, we have a delay of 4 weeks to 6 weeks or 3 weeks or 2 weeks, and you can't manage that delay.
Right.
It could be the middle of winter and you can't get a quorum. So, I think when we're talking about our financial
Right.
health, and Bill needs to have some authority.
Yeah, who actually oversees the audit? The audit committee reviews it, but in terms of ensuring the audit's running on time and that they're getting all the information.
Right, so I make sure that we start it and that the process is running and we meet the deadline. So the audit is turned in to the audit committee for review. The auditor is actually either here in person or by Zoom. If there's any questions reference the audit, then the audit committee recommends the findings of the audit to the commissioners, and then the commissioners can go through and ask questions, and we can have the auditor there to answer them.
Right. So the audit committee, to me, is an oversight function, not a day-to-day management of the process. And so I'm going to come back to give the responsibility to the town manager who's running what goes on in the town, and ask for the concurrence of the committee to do something. And I think it could be as simple as a phone call. Commissioner Persinger, do you have another comment or anything like that?
No, I don't. It's really up to you guys, how specific you want to make this, but I think I generally agree with the direction that you're going, Dave.
Okay. So I think Jimmy, Elaine, is there?
Yeah, I was thinking about it while you were talking, and there are checks and balances, because this particular situation was one where the town manager had to act somewhat quickly to get on top of it, because no matter how much you can have an emergency meeting, you could do that. But there's the checks and balances are in the contract. You sign a contract, they have to approve, the council has to approve that contract. Is that correct, Bill?
So the contract was an RFP, yes, it had to go to the audit committee, and then from there, it had to go to the commissioners.
So there are the checks and balances, and if there was issues with our finances with the other checks and balances, and you all of a sudden fired the auditor because you didn't like the report, I think there'd be a lot of ruckus. So I think it's okay I think it's okay to leave it with the administrator. I think it's probably enough checks and balances.
Okay. I see Dave Moskowitz. He wants to make a public comment. David?
Yeah, David Moskowitz, and I'm actually a licensed CPA in the state of Delaware. And I just joined late, so I'm just giving the town manager authority, but it's very important that the audit committee retain authority over choosing the auditor. I'm not sure if I'm missing something, but the way things have worked has worked well. And the fact that the audit committee chooses the auditor, and you want to keep the town manager a part of it because the reason is he's management and the auditor is supposed to be independent and reporting to the audit committee, who then reports to the commissioners. So it's sort of like a nuance. And the audit is done on the town with the town manager working with the auditor to give them the information, but then the auditor is supposed to report to the audit committee, not the town manager. So I would hope that doesn't change, and the audit committee is the one hiring the auditor, choosing the auditor by recommendation to the town commissioners, and then also sending their findings to the town commissioner. Because if you have a town manager doing fraud or things, it's very important that there be some independent process, and that's why the audit committee is supposed to be independent of the town and the town manager.
Okay, thank you. I don't think we're suggesting any kind of change to what you just described there. All right. With that said, can I get a motion that we make a recommendation that the town manager, as the respondent, can have the ability to release the audit firm with concurrence of the audit committee? That,
I did last time.
Okay, I'll make the motion.
thank you, Marcia.
I'll
Jimmy,
second it.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Lane. So can I assume all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, let's move on to the next item, which is section 19, which relates to the police force, chief of police, and beach patrol. There are, I guess, two issues here. The first speaks to, is an amendment needed to clarify hiring of a candidate pending completion of training? And I'm going to ask for a little background.
So, as you know, we've hired a new police chief. We went through a very transparent process with members of the community being on panels and going through a round robin, making recommendations, and those recommendations were then given to the commissioners, and the commissioners held their own interviews, and they went through the whole process. And the person that came out number one was not certified in the state of Delaware. She was certified in the state of Maryland. So what I think the commissioners or maybe the mayor is looking for here is, should we put something in there that says, just to clarify that the candidate will be hired pending completion of the training, because our current chief had to go through state of Delaware law enforcement training, which took about 90 days to complete. And then once she completed that, she was officially our police chief. So I think we're looking for some clarification there that's not in here. Is that correct, Commissioner Persinger?
Yeah, that's correct. I think, having the requirement that any candidate satisfy the Delaware Council on Police training requirements is a very good requirement to include. It's just, it makes it very difficult to consider out-of-state candidates because you can't expect them necessarily to have already satisfied those. So in this case, I did suggest a potential solution here, and it's included in a comment that I have on the side of the, I don't know which version you might be looking at of the charter at this point, but it would read something like the following. Let's see. The town council shall select the chief of police from at least 3 candidates recommended by the town manager, who qualifications is established by the town manager and approved by the town council, and here's the relevant change, and who satisfy, and then I would add, or may reasonably be expected to complete the requirements of the Delaware Council on Police training under Regulation 800 of Title I of the Delaware Administrative Code. And then I would add a second sentence that says, any candidate that has not satisfied these requirements would be required to complete them as a condition of employment.
Okay. Any comments on that? Any disagreements on that?
No.
No. Elaine, any disagreement with that
No,
recommendation?
no disagreement.
Okay. So then, can I get a motion to adopt Commissioner Persinger's suggestions?
I'd make a motion to adopt
Thank you, Jimmy.
Commissioner Persinger's recommendations.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right, the next item, so I'm gonna ask, so the issue here is, should a contract of no more than 3 years be required for the beach patrol captain? And Bill, I'm gonna ask you again to give me a little background on that.
Yeah, so Todd Fritchman, who's been captain, this is his 28th year coming up. He's been operating without a contract, which for so far has not been an issue. But the mayor, as town manager, I think there should be a contract involved. I have a contract, the police chief has a contract, so probably the captain of the beach patrol should have a contract. It's not saying that Captain Fritchman's not doing, he's doing a great job. He's been doing it for 28 years, and he continues to do a good job. But I just think if you're requiring other administrators and leaders in the town to have these type of contracts, the lifeguard captain should be included.
Should be included. Commissioner Pershinger, any comments on that?
No, I think the only issue here is that the current charter doesn't include any specification about the term of the contract for the beach patrol captain. So this would, I think, make it a potential change here would make it consistent with requirements for the police chief.
Okay. I see, we have a public comment.
May I speak?
Sure.
Yeah. So when we did the charter, I almost remember we did it a few years ago. We put that the town manager may do a contract with the beach patrol chief. So I'm not sure if that, because I'm reading online the language and it says the captain of beach patrol may serve under an employment contract. It means the town manager could do it. Why? It doesn't sound like it should be required, because in the past, the last town manager didn't choose to do it. It sounds perfect. With the police chief, actually the police chief, the last police chief didn't serve under the contract for the last few years. It just auto renewed. So technically it was a month to month, but then there's other laws. So I think May is better because it allows the town flexibility. If the town manager wants to do a contract, he could. There's nothing stopping him. But why would you require it and then hamstring future town managers?
Thank you. I'm going to go around to each of the committee members and kind of get their input. Jimmy, I'm going to start with you.
I have no comment on
No
it.
comment. Okay.
It's kind of, I don't see the need for it, but
You don't see the need for the contract? No, you don't see the need for the change, given the word may.
correct.
Which in your mind gives the town manager the discretion to do it? Okay. Elaine?
I didn't see, I thought that 3-year contract would be security, even though Todd's been here for a long time. But if he was going to leave, it'd be nice to know. And usually these contracts are not like you're signing a contract with that you can't get out of if there's some reasonable reason. So I'd be curious to ask Bill, you know, is this something that you feel that is a good practice just across the board for stability?
So I know, like with my contract, it says I have to give so many days of notification, or I could lose some benefits. Captain Fritchman at this time doesn't have those type of benefits, but it's always good to have some type of written document that says that they should provide some type of notification. That doesn't mean that you could still walk away, but I think it'd be good to have a 3-year contract. And the fact that it says may, I mean, I just think that all your leadership, myself, the chief, and the beach patrol captain should be in a contract.
Marcia?
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. And
Yeah.
to think
Okay.
leadership positions when we are basically a contractual organization
Right.
should be under contract.
So I think then the suggestion, if I'm here around the table, is that we're going to recommend to the commissioners that the captain of the beach patrol be given a contract. Is that what we're saying? Or I guess I want to get that first. Do we recommend that that's what should happen? I'm going to say yes. Marcia,
I would say
you
yes.
agree? Elaine, do you agree?
I agree.
Jimmy, you're not in favor?
I agree. It just, we've been very lucky with Todd.
Right.
I mean, so in the future, probably a contract would be beneficial.
Okay.
Let's say it that way.
Okay. So, thank you. So with that, I'm going to ask for a first of the motion. Thanks, Elaine.
Mhm.
Second.
Second?
All right. And I'm going to say, is all agreed, say aye.
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 Okay. Thank you. We'll move on to section 20.
Dave, I'm sorry, Dave, can I
Yes.
ask a question?
Sure.
As part of your motion, does it include the fact that, does it include a requirement that the term be no more than 3 years? Is that part of your motion or not?
We did not speak to it. We did not speak to it. We just said a contract was just a recommendation.
All right.
What's currently written is it says it will not exceed 3 years. You feel like we need to clarify that, Commissioner Persinger?
Well, yeah, there's no requirement in the charter right now. The question is, do you want to have a requirement in there that it be no more than 3 years?
Well, I'm sorry. I was looking at what I have here. It said the contract must not exceed 3 years. Is that?
Okay, I'm confusing myself here. Is that already in the charter?
I haven't said, I don't have, so I think it's D1, 19D1.
Let's see. Yeah, I don't know if that's the current language or that's an addition. Okay, I'd have to go back and look at the chart. Go ahead and we can come back to this if necessary.
Okay. All right. So we'll leave it there for now, and let's move on to section 20, which deals with aldermen and the assistant aldermen. Question here is, should the penalty figures be updated? And does this conflict with any other penalty provisions, especially regarding the removal of trees? So, go ahead.
So, and Dawn can jump in on this, but right now I think our penalty for removing a tree is $3,000. Dawn, am I correct on that?
Yes, it is.
So that's what we're really focusing on here with this section.
I see. So the issue is we're basically out of compliance because we say here in section M, in excess of $1,000, may impose penalty. Oh, today they're prohibited from issuing a penalty greater than $1,000, and our tree ordinance is $3,000. So I'm going to put this out there is if we were to change this amount from $1,000 to $3,000, does that not resolve the conflict? Dawn?
It would for that portion of the code, unless there's another code with a fine / penalty and so forth that would be 5,000, something of that nature. And I'm just throwing that out, not knowing what a greater penalty might be.
If I could interject one other comment here. I raised this issue about the trees. And I'm not entirely sure it's relevant. We're talking in this paragraph about penalties that could be levied by the alderman or assistant alderman. The tree penalty is something that's levied by the town, that's backed up by the town code. I'm not sure that there's any problem with that. And I'm not sure it creates a conflict with what's in section 20. I mean, it's a question we can ask of the town attorney, but you could kind of back up just a step here and just ask yourselves whether or not, in the absence of anything else, is $1,000 a reasonable penalty, or should it be increased rather? Put the tree ordinance aside. What do you think is fair, if you have a view on it at all?
Anybody have a comment?
We have fined people $1,000 recently for taking trees out. Whether they knew that they shouldn't have done that or not, they went ahead and just paid the $1,000. So, Dawn, am I correct?
Where's the 3,000 come from?
It's in, that was what was put in the ordinance, the tree ordinance, when we revised the tree ordinance. The effort, quite candidly, was around to increase the penalty so that it had some teeth. So the problem is, in this case, that they chose not to do it, and they were only charged $1,000 as opposed to being charged $3,000.
We changed it to 3.
Right.
We recommend we
Right.
change it. to
I guess I would say at least
Make
3.
it consistent.
And my only other comment would be, what do the other municipalities allow? Are we in alignment with the other
Dawn may know
municipalities?
that. I don't know that.
Right. So I guess just to kind of keep things moving, I'd say I'd like to make the recommendation that it be moved to at least 3,000 pending some investigation into what other communities are doing.
Dawn had something to say.
Yeah, Dawn.
On this particular incident, there was a tree removed without a permit. It should have been permitted if it was to be removed. So as a result, we received a complaint. When I say we, the town received a complaint. I wrote a violation letter stating that the tree should not have been removed. No permit was issued, and therefore it was a $3,000 fine and needed to be paid. It was rebuffed by another attorney stating, and it was brought up that our charter said max of 1,000. So as a result of that, I do believe the town contacted our town attorney, and then it was then changed from a $3,000 fine to a $1,000 fine based on this charter amount for the alderman and so forth. So that's how that came about. What other towns charge, I am not aware of. I have not investigated that, researched it. I can certainly do so, but I don't. For some reason, Rehoboth sticks in my mind that at one point they had charged a fine of $5,000 for, and I don't know if this was over the course of several days or multiple trees, so forth. I'd have to research that, but that's how this issue of the tree ordinance, $3,000 fine changed to a $1,000 fine. And so that's why this is before you folks.
Dave,
Yes, sir.
I have to, I was not aware of that incident at all, so thank you, Dawn, for bringing that up. I raised this issue of the possible connection between the charter and the $3,000 tree fine without knowing that at all. So that's a good practical example. I wasn't aware of that. So it sounds like there is much more of a need for change than I thought there was.
So
And-
the ordinance, the $3,000 ordinance, what month, year was that ordinance of 3,000? When was that put in? If you look at the date, the $3,000 number. I didn't hear you.
I think it was within the past year. I don't remember
Yes.
specifically.
It was definitely within the last year. I'm going to say within 6
Yes.
months.
All right, so basically what happened is isn't this a kind of thing, Bill, or that once an ordinance passed that you make sure that the language, especially for this fine, is corrected in other areas? Isn't that something that automatically happens?
No, it doesn't automatically happen. We would like it to, and that's one of the things that we will be discussing a little later,
Okay,
but
I
it's
saw that.
automatically just doesn't happen.
Right. So with that said, I think I'm going to ask for a motion that we increase the fine to $3,000. I'm going to ask for approval of that from the group with a
I
caveat.
second it.
Okay, thank you.
Can we, Justin, can we still have discussion or no?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I just think that also we should make a recommendation that we give it a little more teeth than that, because our whole objective is to maintain the trees. And if you're someone building, there are now two $6.5 million houses going up in the North End. And I'm not saying me personally, but if I'm building a $6.5 million house, I'm not really going to care probably about a $3,000 fine. That's the cost of doing business for putting my house up. So when I say a little more teeth, it is, I believe we should recommend also hand in hand with that, because I don't think it's very effective if it's just monetary, that a tree of X amount needs to be replaced, and we need to explore more of that. And what I can say is, when you watch, particularly, I can tell you in southern regions, when people are building houses, they bring in $10,000 trees. They're not waiting for trees to grow. They bring in 30-foot trees in a crane. And if you had to pay the fine and bring in a 30-foot tree to replace it for $20,000 in a crane, meaning you don't just get to wipe the trees off your lot and have your free lot with your views, they need to be replaced. I don't think it has a whole lot of teeth if you're building a $3 million house and it's 0.5% of what your house costs, but you remove the trees, because our objective is to maintain the trees. So I think we need to get, and really, you know, a lot of these communities where they're building multi-million dollar houses, they will bring these trees in on flatbeds that are already 25 feet tall. That can be done. And I think it should go hand in hand. When you take out a tree that's over 20 or 25 feet, there's a minimum replacement requirement at your cost at a certain time period within a certain parameter, dictating where it's going to be on the lot, then another 25 plus tree is replaced. And if that doesn't happen, there is a fine that escalates for all the time that you don't enact that. Because I don't think right now that's going to matter to someone building a $7 million house.
So I can tell you that because I worked with commissioners on that, on the ordinance, and there is similar language to what you're talking about. The penalty is, I think, $3,000. I thought we'd hope that would have enough. I agree with you that I think 3 is not enough compared to a $6 million house. But that seemed fair and equitable at the time, and to get the change in. There was also some wording in there about trying to replace it with some level of like kind based on the width and the height of the width of the diameter and the height of the tree. We could definitely bring that up as a group and say, would we like to recommend a higher penalty? We have to bring that to the table and say, do we want to change it?
I think a higher penalty, but also a second
And the replacement,
phase.
there is placement, there is replacement in it.
But for me, like kind, I go out and buy a 5-foot cherry tree. It's gonna take 25 years to replace that tree, really, to the sense of what they took out.
Mr. Chair, I think Dawn had a comment.
Oh, Dawn? I'm sorry.
That's okay. In the current code, section 173-6, it talks about the penalty. It talks about the kind of tree, the size of tree, things of that nature, if it was removed, and then what needs to be replaced. And if it's not done within a certain time period, then there's another penalty and so forth until the tree is replaced. Could this current code be greater and so forth, much more strict, so that our folks realize that the town really does want trees here? Then yes, but we do have 173-6 as part of a current violation, penalty, and requirement of replacement.
Don, does that, I love, Marcia, your idea, really brilliant. And yes, they can do that with trees. I see it in DC, very expensive homes all the time. But Don, is 173-6, does that talk about the height, or is it, as she said, replacing a sapling with a full-grown tree that they tore down? And is this person who was fined in that area, are they having to replace that tree?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, because I've now, on my laptop, I've gone to the actual town code so that I can help read that, so to get the correct wording. So if there's an improper removing or destroying of a tree, shall be subject to a fine of $3,000 and shall be required to replace such tree with a tree of comparable size and comparable species selected from the Delaware Department of Agricultural list of recommended trees. So whenever I speak to folks, I let them know, yes, if you've taken down a tree such as whatever, you cannot just go to Lowe's and get yourself a 18-inch bare root plant and think that you're going to automatically have obeyed the code. No. So then that particular code says 173-6. Item C continues on, stating fines for improper removal or destruction that remain unpaid after 60 days shall incur an additional $3,000 penalty. Failure to replace the tree as required within a 1-year period, as determined by the town building official, shall incur an additional $3,000 penalty, increasing by $3,000 for each additional year that the tree is not replaced. So that's what our current code says. And so now back to the illustration, the actual account that did take place here in town. Yes, that property will be required to replace that tree. They have not done so yet, but they will be doing so.
That's interesting.
But I think then it's just if we're saying of equal size, then it comes back with the town on enforcement. And I think we have, as a town, been very clear about how important the tree enforcement is. I think the other thing that would help mitigate some of that is a notice from the town going out to the tree companies and possibly adding to our enforcement that if a licensed tree company or unlicensed removes a tree, that they are also fined $3,000. And, there's a lot of teeth to, I'm not participating in a tree removal without a permit because there's a $3,000 fine to my tree company, which is probably equal to what I charge them to remove the tree. Just a thought.
That's a good thought.
It's a good thought.
I mean, I think it's really important we get this right very quickly because we've got more construction going on than we ever have, and it's not going to stop. And all of a sudden, particularly in the north end and in the southern and mid parts of town where we have fewer and fewer trees, we will become a Ocean City beach town. So
I totally agree. I totally agree.
I mean, I do like the notice to all tree companies in Sussex County, or I don't know how you do it, just any registered tree company in Sussex County. I know some of them will come from Kent County, but something to give more thought to. How do we get a notice together to, tree companies that there's going to be fines for them too? And I think that's something we could recommend to the commissioners with an equal fine to both parties.
Okay. So I think I'm gonna.
Just for the sake of FOIA, anything with the trees was not on the agenda. Totally respect the discussion if you guys want to push it next month and go more in depth with it. But you're not going to be able to do any votes or in-depth discussion about doing anything with the tree ordinance. This was more so just the.
Okay.
And we can put it on the next agenda.
So I'm going to suggest we do this. I'm going to suggest we bring it back next month, and we'll have the ordinance in front of us. We can all do a little more research, but I like the thinking everybody's got there. So I'll put it back on next month's agenda. In the meantime, are we agreed? I think we agreed to raise the fine, our recommendation for the fine to $3,000.
Yes.
Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Let's move on to section 33, prohibition on gambling. So the issue, I'm going to need some background here, is does this permit sales of National Lottery tickets, or is an amendment needed? So right now it says, except for lotteries as conducted by the state and nonprofit charitable gaming as permitted by the state law, gambling shall be prohibited within town limits. I'm not sure what brought this up. Is there
So I think the mayor's thought was just to let you know that, for example, if you wanted to buy a lottery ticket in the town of Dewey Beach, you can't do it. The way this is written right now. Just, I think that's the reason. So if you wanted, you could go up to the Valero and the Forgotten Mile and buy one, but I don't think right now under our current code charter, you could buy a lottery ticket in the town. And I think one way or the other, I don't think the mayor really cared. He just wanted to
Make sure it was clear in the
Yeah.
on the chart. I guess I'm confused. It says, except for lotteries as conducted by the state. Is
I
that
mean, there's sports betting now. There's a whole bunch different by the state.
right?
They've opened it up to a lot. So, you know, I don't think it's just a lottery ticket.
So I don't follow the lottery. It's the lottery, not state.
No, it's state and
It's-
federal. So.
It's state and federal. So I guess the question would be, except for lotteries as conducted by the federal government or state and non-profitable permit, gambling shall be prohibited. I mean, does that cover it? Do we need it? I guess the question is, do we really need it?
I would hate to see lottery signs all over.
Well,
I think it says something different.
Dave, I think there's a question,
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I think there's a question we asked the town attorney. Are national lottery tickets really prohibited from sale in Dewey Beach by our current provision in the charter? I guess what we need from the sense of this committee is, should that be allowed? I mean, should there be a definitive opportunity to sell not only state and nonprofit charitable gaming, or to allow that, and also allow the sales of national lottery tickets? I mean, if that's the sense of the committee, then we can make sure that the charter either does or doesn't cover that. And if it doesn't, then we can make it an appropriate amendment.
And just to add, so it says that lotteries are run by 48 jurisdictions, 45 states, plus the District of Columbia, so they're not a federal.
So there are multiple states. Okay. So does anybody have a strong opinion on selling? So we allow it for state, and we allow it for non-profitable. Does anybody have an issue with multiple states or national lottery tickets?
I think it's all run through the state.
Right, you think it's all the state?
It's all run through the state.
Okay.
But there's national lotteries.
Right,
But through Delaware.
right.
And
I think it's all, oh, I see what you're saying. You think it's all through, even federal comes through via the state. Therefore, we really don't need to do anything here, if that's correct.
It's just doing a lottery or not. I think that's the question.
Right, do you want to be able to sell lottery tickets in the town?
I don't think Rehoboth sells lottery tickets anywhere. You know, we really have a small downtown, and I think I agree with Jimmy that, do you want lottery tickets here? And every time there's a big jackpot, there's a line of 200 people waiting for a lottery ticket. I just don't think it's the culture we want. I don't think it has anything to do really with the gambling or the ticket itself. I think our ordinance stands, but you do get these big lottery pots and people are very close, and all of a sudden you have 100 people standing in line down the street waiting for a lottery ticket. We're just not even set up to manage that.
Right. So we don't have to do anything with this. I mean, we can just let it stand the way it is.
I think it would open the door.
Yeah.
For Keno and everything else. That's
I agree.
Elaine, any comments?
I don't like gambling, so in any form. So, but David Moskowitz actually said he could clarify this. I don't know if you want to take his comment.
Yeah, please, David. We'll open up to David. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I think at a past town meeting, the mayor was talking about the Powerball. The Powerball is not federal; it's a multi-state, where Delaware jointly does it with other states. So it's a Delaware lottery, and Delaware lotteries are allowed, including the Powerball board in Dewey Beach as of now. I don't understand why you would prohibit it. The reason why you don't see it is it costs money to have and to do, like that machine at the Wawa. It's not cheap, and unless you're getting enough foot traffic year round, a place is not doing it. There's also sports gambling allowed in Delaware, but if you look at like restaurants, including like Woody's, there's a huge cost to have that. so you haven't seen it implemented. But to my knowledge, the way the charter reads, both could be allowed. It's just no one has chosen to do it. But I don't also think Dewey Beach could prohibit a state lottery, because I think the state may have rights that Dewey can't stop. It wouldn't make sense. So it's not like marijuana.
I did actually just comment on what David's saying. That's how I read this too. And it's, you can have lottery, nobody's stopping you, but nobody can force Woody's or, anybody to put a machine in, and they just haven't. So there hasn't been a culture, and how we've had the law, I guess, that protects us is that we want no expansion of that beyond what the state already has said is legal, by saying gambling shouldn't be prohibited except for the charitable gambling that's permitted in the lotteries.
The original intent of this charter amendment was way back, I think, during the Diane Hansen era, when they were trying to prohibit poker. So when there was poker rooms all over Delaware back in like the 2010s. So that's where this charter amendment came from, I believe.
I didn't want to see that. That's where it came.
That's what came from, okay. All right. So I think I'm going to go around again. I think the consensus is no movement on this specific item. Agree?
Agree.
Okay. All right. We'll make no action on that item. We're going to move on to the second agenda item. So I don't know if anybody has, from the public, any comment on the second agenda item. We're going to get some background on this specific item in just a minute, but there is a proposal from General Code to provide some input and some review of our code. I'm going to ask Bill to give us a little background on it and where we are. At this point, this isn't really anything I don't think we have to vote on. At this point, it's just for a knowledge of the group.
Yeah, so with our town clerk, she did some background and looked at this company, General Code, to review our code overall. It hasn't been done in some time. This will be discussed Friday at the commissioners meeting. It's on the agenda, and we hope at that time to have a representative zoom in from General Code to answer some of the questions about what actual service they can provide to us for $12,000, approximately $12,000. We want to get those questions answered before we move any further on it.
Right. So if you take a look at the proposal, to me, it's a very interesting opportunity to have somebody go through our code. It kind of answers a lot of things we said about inconsistencies, any problems in our code that some automated, I guess I'm assuming it's an automated tool goes through and looks at. And then they come back with some kind of recommendation. We still have to go through any of the recommendations, but it sounds like an interesting effort to see what they actually come up with.
You know what I comment about it? I thought it looked really interesting too, and I'd be curious what Don has to say about this and Bill. But the price was great. I mean, couldn't have a better price with all the things that they offered you. But then you felt like once they did that, they didn't tell you all the updates. And you have a lot of ordinance all through the year that are updated, and they didn't give, I don't think, a breakout price. And once you have them do this, and it's like electronically, I would assume that, do we get in a situation where the intro price was, $9.99, but if you want the roof, that's going to cost you $1,000. So have you looked into that at all, Don or Bill?
So I think just like what we did with the accommodations program that we presented to the commissioners, we asked, when they did the presentation to the company, the commissioners had the opportunity to ask specific questions about what is offered in the different prices, and then the follow-up. And I think that'll happen on Friday during the commissioners meeting. We don't have the answers right now.
Right. So I think, Bill, that would be, go ahead, Commissioner Persinger.
Yeah, this is the same proposal we looked at in December, and it's now back on our agenda for January, on Friday. And the problem we had when we looked at this initially is that what's proposed here is to do a recodification of our town code, and to base that on an editorial and legal analysis of our existing code. For $11,500, you can probably do a fair amount of editing, but how much legal analysis, substantive legal analysis, are you going to get for that amount of money? That's the problem that I had, trying to match up what I would think is a fairly large level of effort with the very small price that's proposed here. You know, if you read through the proposal, there are a lot of questions that are raised about. It sounds like there's a software product that's involved, and maybe a lot of this review is done through some sort of software mechanism. It's just not clear to me. So hopefully, as Bill Zolper said, we'll have a representative who can help us go through this a little more detail and understand exactly what it is we would get for $11,500. And as was pointed out, what other expenditures could we expect to keep up whatever product we have, make sure it's current, consistent, and usable. The other question I had too, and it seems that this company either owns or is associated with Ecode 360, which is the company that currently houses the electronic version of our town code. Not sure what that relationship is. I mean, we already have the Ecode 360. It's already fully searchable. It's accessible to everybody. So how much reorganization or recodification or consistency checking is this firm going to do for that amount of money? Those are really the questions that, at least that I have, as we talk about this on Friday.
And I think Commissioner Persinger's point is a really good one, because when this is the first time I heard the price, and I think it's ridiculously low.
Right.
I mean, a firm that's really going to do a legal analysis and a good high-level professional analysis is going to be charging between $150 and $200 an hour. If you have a $12,000 contract, that's only 60 hours. And I know just from us all being on the code committee, we don't need a computer check. We need a really, I mean, if we're going to dive into this, I would have thought this was about a $100,000 project. So I think we should be pretty mindful about what we're getting. We do need some expertise in looking at our code, but as we all know, having done it, it is a lot of digging down into conjecture of the reading.
Right.
So
I agree. I think it's a great idea, and we'll see what more research comes back.
I think Kate has a comment.
Yeah, Kate, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, Ecode 360 and General Code are one and the same. So this isn't, this isn't a new company. General Code has been working with our code.
Okay.
Anytime we pass new ordinances, they all go to General Code. They work with our codification. We've worked with them for quite some time now. Again, I don't have any more information. We will on Friday. But I do agree with Commissioner Persinger's point that I think this does have to do with the software. This is different than, say, handing over the entire book to someone who's never really looked at the code before and saying, here you go, good luck. Since we've been doing business with General Code for some time, I'm sure they have some sort of algorithm system. They already have access to everything we have on the books. So that could perhaps be why it would be a little bit cheaper than, say, handing it to someone brand new, sight unseen, and having them go through the entire thing.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Anything else on that specific item? We'll move, if not, we'll move to the next agenda item. Okay. The next agenda item is number 3, discuss and possibly vote to recommend to the town commissioners amendments to chapter 71 of the town code regarding building permit requirements when repairs are needed to residential or commercial properties. So the ordinance was posted, if you recall. Mr. Steve Spence, who was representing Highway 1, came in and made a public comment in the last meeting. They've come back and suggested the changes to the ordinance we have in front of us tonight. I'm going to ask for some comments from Dawn and Bill here. I do want to start with the first item, which is D1, which states here, normal maintenance to existing structures requiring less than $3,500 in material cost per project. Or I just want to point out that in our last meeting, we made the recommendation to increase it from $1,000 to $2,500 from a maintenance perspective. So I don't know if there's, I think we probably are going to get into defining maintenance and repairs and having a conversation on that. But I do want to point out we can come back to the dollar value. There are some things I think we need to consider in terms of what's required from FEMA for our floodplain, to comply with FEMA and the
He's looking through your.
NFIP, National Flood Insurance Program, that I think we all need to be aware of. Because most of the town is in a flood zone. Everything south of Claymont Street is in a flood zone. Clayton Street, excuse me, is in a flood zone. So there are requirements in order for us to be able to get flood insurance. And we all, I think, recognize the importance of flood insurance given where we live. So let's move to, do we want to, does anybody want to have a conversation about the material value that we changed last time? Go ahead.
Yeah, I can comment on that. I talked to City of Lewis and City of Rehoboth, and neither one of them have a minimum. That the maintenance or construction is not tied to a minimum dollar amount. So
Construction or just maintenance or repair?
maintenance is not tied to a minimum dollar amount for either of them. So as an example, for City of Lewis, no permit is needed for most non-structural interior work, such as painting, trim work, flooring, installing flooring, renovating a kitchen, meaning changing cabinets, countertops, etc., that doesn't involve moving walls, moving plumbing or electrical, installing of new flooring. Pretty much anything that is non-structural interior work does not require a permit. These are all considered upgrades and or maintenance. There is no threshold for a dollar amount. Permits are required for roofing, siding, all physical construction that is structural. Exterior landscaping, patio, fencing, driveways, patios require a permit. Laying of sod and installing landscaping does not require a permit, even if the contractor's doing the work. The contractor doesn't, and also, even if the contractor's doing the work, installing your new kitchen cabinets or your countertops, they do not need a permit, whether it doesn't designate whether it's owner or contractor installed. They just need a license in the City of Lewis. So maintenance on pools, patios, etc. does not require a permit and has no dollar minimum or maximum. CAC and hot water replacement of units does not require a permit as long as it's installed in the same general vicinity. And I talked to her a little bit about those. They do not want homeowners to have to wait any amount of time to simply replace an air conditioning unit or a hot water heater or something that functionally keeps their house running. Permit costs were, I believe, 1.5% to the homeowner and 2% to the contractor. So we're significantly higher in permitting costs than both Dewey and Rehoboth. And then Rehoboth.
Lewis is significantly higher.
No, we are. We're 3%.
Right.
Lewis is 1.5% and 2%.
Right.
And Rehoboth is 2% for a single family home, and a condo or commercial is 3%. So when you look at the balance, we're significantly more aggressive in pretty much every way, because we're calling out a ton of things that both of our sister cities consider regular maintenance and don't require permits or fees. And we are 1 to 1.5% higher for the permit fee. So we're at a pretty good imbalance there. Rehoboth, painting, replacement of carpet, flooring, no permit is required. Contractor can do it. He doesn't need a permit to do it. He only needs a license. Repairs, permits, Rehoboth treats more on an individual basis. They consider anything that being replaced that exists is not needing a permit. So if you have a staircase and you're replacing the entire staircase and it already exists and you're not moving it, it doesn't matter. I asked her if it's costing me $7,000 to replace it. No, it's not tied to an amount of money. And Rehoboth is 2%, 3% for commercial. CAC units do need a permit. Water heaters do not need a permit. They don't want people waiting. I think something that's really important about Rehoboth, because they are so large, Joanne she approves permits for anything that is non-structural, meaning anything that is not construction of an addition or a building, and Corey does all the structural. So they've really separated out so that the non-structural can go very quickly into permitting. For Rehoboth, also grass seed, sod, plants, mulch requires no permit no matter how much it costs. So I think we have to be very sensitive to that. And I think when you look at our two sister cities, basically have no dollar amount threshold. And Mr. Spence's concern, I think, is a valid one, that, you know, there really are general maintenance items that cost $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. And I feel like being part of the permitting structure in a pretty aggressive way, for me being involved in getting a lot of permits, we really do get bogged down in issuing permits for things that are, in my opinion, and very like kind to Rehoboth and Lewis, considered general maintenance with no limitations on cost.
Right.
So I think, just as a baseline, those are those two cities. I think we should look at Bethany, and, you know, Bethany would be the only other one, but I think when you look at, we are definitely way more aggressive in what we're requiring and how we're defining maintenance.
Right.
And I think it's my opinion that the other two cities are being more reasonable in, and I think that's what we're hearing, that we're a little unreasonable in how aggressive we're getting in trying to define what maintenance is. Maintenance is fixing something that already exists. I don't think we should get in the weeds about, you know, how did it exist? You know, is it $2,000? Is it $4,000? Is it, when we see our sister cities pretty much have no cap or minimum dollar amount, and their quote definition by the building officials of maintenance is replacing something that already exists.
Right.
Even down to kitchen cabinets. And I said, can I rip out, install my entire kitchen? It's going to cost me $20,000, but I'm only replacing what's there, installing granite. I'm not moving walls. I'm not changing anything. It would not require a permit, even if a contractor was doing it, because it's a replacement.
Right.
So I think that's just kind of a baseline of what I looked at.
Okay. And anybody else have any other comment they want to bring up?
My comments are, I'm not sure about how much income that we get off of these permits, and I don't know how how our budget would look if we didn't get, and I know that that's part of running the city, but I also, living in a complex with 46 units, I thank God that these, and being the president of the association, that there is some oversight by Don and other people to the contractors that are coming in and doing the work, because they have to, and now that you have the person driving around making sure that they actually do have a permit, and at the time, I'm sure they have to have their license. So you don't have a bunch of handyman who claim that they can actually do work. In my building, when you take out the cabinets, you might be hitting main pumping main lines, electrical lines, and other things. So I'm really, but then on the other hand, I understand what she's saying, because everything has gone up with inflation, and then paying for regular maintenance of replacing something just is another thing that makes it expensive. So I feel like, I think the last time we talked about having to have Bill provide, and maybe he has it now, to provide a better number, and Gary, and you're on the, to also provide a better number of how important this income is to the, and it's not just about income. It's about also oversight of the guys that are working in our town as well. So I'd like to not have to pay these permits, but these are the other side to it.
So do we have, I think, Commissioner Mercier, give some information on the dollar value of the permits?
He doesn't, I do.
Yeah, I just want to give a quick, make a quick point here. With a threshold, if we had a threshold level, you really could relieve the burden, the major burden, on probably 150 to 200 permits a year, just by an appropriate threshold, anywhere from $7,500 to $10,000 in terms of the cost of the project. So there's a significant amount of administrative burden that could be relieved there, both for the homeowner or property owner as well as the town staff. And the hit on town revenue would be fairly minimal, $30,000 or less, something in that neighborhood. That's something that's probably manageable. So there's some room to move here, but building permits is an important revenue stream for the town. I think it generates somewhere over $600,000, I believe, a year, if I'm correct. And it's also important because 20% of the building permit revenues goes toward our infrastructure funds. And that's an important source of income that we use to alleviate some of the stormwater management problems that we have here in town. And if you were here this past weekend, you saw those in spades. There were some real problems in town last weekend.
Is it $600,000? I thought it was greater than that.
That stuck in my mind.
Right. I remember looking at it was 20% of the budget, contributed to 20% of the revenues.
I'm not sure. I have to go back and look. No, I know that at $2,500, that requirement, we wouldn't lose.
Right.
There's not much money that
Right.
we're losing by that.
Right.
I don't know if we took it up to 3,500. I don't know. It is a source of revenue for the town without the town property tax, besides the beach replenishment.
Right.
It does help out significantly with our budget.
Right.
I think Dawn could probably add a little bit more about her feelings on the requirements for what should be permitted and what shouldn't be permitted, and then what FEMA says we have to do with the applications at least to track that.
So with that, I agree. Dawn?
Yes.
So I would, I'm going to ask you a question, then I'm going to ask you to fill us in on your thoughts, and I think you should brief us on some of the FEMA requirements, since so much of the town is in a flood zone, which probably, I think Rehoboth and Lewis is not. But anyway, first of all, my first question is there anything in our code that defines repairs or maintenance?
Within our code, we do not have a definition for repair or the term maintenance.
Right. And can I also ask, the only building code that we specify is the International Building Code, which is primarily new structures. Is that right?
Well, that's the one that the county has adopted, which is currently, it's the 2021 IRC and IBC, and that reflects current new construction. However, each of those particular codes do reference the existing building code, but in order for a municipality or a locality to work with that particular existing building code, it would have to be adopted through legislation.
So would there be any drawback in adopting the IEBC? I think what you're saying is we still need to embrace specific functions of it, or specific chapters or ordinances of it, but in terms of a guideline for existing building structures?
I don't know how to answer that. Because I know the county is the one that the town has chosen to implement, inspect, and so forth, any construction within the town. Now, the town's responsibility is zoning and floodplain. We have to abide by that. And zoning, of course, is local, the local jurisdiction and the commissioners that enforce it or create those rules and regulations. When it comes to floodplain, it has been adopted by the commissioners back in years past to adopt the NFIP, and then, of course, another program called CRS. But that all has become part of our code, Section 101. It is our flood reduction code that we are required to follow by our code.
And so that code is basically speaks to any properties in a flood zone, is that correct?
Yes, it's any property that's located in what's called a special flood hazard area. Because I think the world is probably in a flood zone after all we've seen on the news and so forth. But in Dewey, we have the majority of our town in what's called special flood hazard area. FEMA is the one that has stated this parcel is in this flood zone, this parcel is in that flood zone. And then there's another area called flood zone X, which is basically the northern end of town. That area can flood just like other areas can. However, flood zone X is that it does not, FEMA does not require anyone in that flood zone to buy flood insurance. It is not mandatory. In the other areas, special flood hazard area, if there is any sort of federally backed mortgage, loan, grant, anything of that nature, flood insurance is mandatory. So there is a difference with that. But with a special flood hazard area, it's a greater chance of deeper and more, I'm going to say violent type of flooding than in the X zone, the northern end of town.
Thank you. So I want to bring everybody's attention. It sent out, was posted late today. I think everybody has copies, but Dawn went through and summarized the requirements for the National Flood Insurance Program and what the code is for each of the municipalities, Dewey, Bethany, Rehoboth, and Sussex for the county. So basically, and Dawn, I'm going to paraphrase, and I hope you'll help me out here, but basically, anytime you do something, we need to keep at least some kind of record. We need to apply at least I'll call it a building application. It doesn't necessarily have to result in a permit, but we absolutely have to supply an application so that we can comply with what FEMA requires. Dawn, can you expound on that?
Our code in Section 101 states we are required to get permits. The application does need to come from either the property owner or their representative. And that is an application for a permit. FEMA, through the National Flood Insurance Program, that the town went into a legal binding agreement back in 1982, states permits are required. And what was sent out late today, unfortunately, I'm sorry about that, talks about how that permits are required per the National Flood Insurance Program and also our code. So other towns, other municipalities, many have stated have within their code the same language as we do. I did not check Lewis, which I will. And Marcia, I appreciate you bringing that up. I checked others, but not Lewis. And so, excuse me. My kitten. And so, because we are in that legal agreement with FEMA, And our code, our law states in 101-12 and 101-13, permits and applications for a permit are required for all sorts of development. And FEMA states development, well, you can see it on your sheet, has to do with buildings and structures. Also, anything such as grading, paving, excavation, whether or not Lewis is involved with something like that, I don't know. But as I said, I will check on that. But these items are required by FEMA. They're required by our flood code. When it comes to cost amounts for a permit, that's up to the jurisdiction if they charge for it. But FEMA wants an audit trail of record of documentation for what is going on in their special flood hazard area because of two possibilities. One, what the homeowner would like to do in renovations and repairs and so forth could be what's called a substantial improvement. And FEMA has specific rules on that kind of renovation and repairs and so forth. So if it's a substantial improvement, then we have guidelines from FEMA that potentially then we've got to elevate the structure. Don't know until we get the application with the details of what they want to do. But then also, so it's not only for substantial improvement, substantial damage analysis that the town is required to do on behalf of FEMA. It is also, if let's say a property is totally compliant with FEMA and the elevation of the property, but the property owner then decides that they would like to do some sort of upgrade, renovation, anything, and then if without a permit, the property owner could possibly do that renovation and make that home, which was once compliant with FEMA, now not be compliant with FEMA. It's the obligation of the floodplain administrator of each town or jurisdiction to make sure that construction, development, repairs, renovations are in compliance with the FEMA rules and regulations, which there are $17 billion pages and books that FEMA publishes to give us information on it. It is just overwhelming with the volume of information that FEMA wants each of the towns, the jurisdictions to enforce. So the bottom line is our floodplain code requires permits and an application for a permit. Whether or not we charge a dollar amount for that is immaterial, but we have to keep these records because when FEMA comes and audits the town, and they do that once a year and also every 5 years, it is a deeper audit. So we've got to keep our end of this legal agreement that we have with FEMA.
So just Dawn, for some clarification,
Uh-huh.
are you saying that FEMA regulations require a permit for everything in the floodplain? For everything someone raises a hammer to do to their house, FEMA requires a permit? I say this respectfully because I feel like there's a disconnect somewhere, because FEMA requirements, Rehoboth and Lewis have the same FEMA requirements, but they consider maintenance at any level certain categories of things that require no permit, even up to $5,000–$10,000. And so what I hear you saying is FEMA requires us to have a permit for literally everything. So I really think we have to figure out where the disconnect is there in terms of looking at what FEMA actually requires. And if FEMA does require a permit for everything, why do Rehoboth and Lewis not require permits for maintenance? And the list goes on for what those, changing, renovating my kitchen, not required. And Rehoboth and Lewis have been doing this way longer than 1982 when we've been incorporated. And so I think before we even look at this, we have to figure out where is the disconnect that our two sister cities who have the same floodplain issues and flood issues are not requiring permits for those. And we're saying we require permits for literally everything. It just, there's something that's not connected there.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just going to take an example because I know in the FEMA, one of the things you mentioned, HVAC systems, right? So, because that's one of the things that was suggested that we eliminate, right? The replacement of an HVAC. But in the FEMA requirement, there's actually, it absolutely calls out anything done to HVACs needs a permit. Not necessarily that we paid for, but it needs a permit, a tracking. Because we went through and researched that. So I agree with you. There's got to be more research on what it is. What is the disconnect? Because everything, all the research Dawn's done, everything we've kind of gone through is that we're bound by these FEMA requirements. We can go back to FEMA and renegotiate, but do you want to open up a box with FEMA on these things? What is and what isn't? It would be, I think, a worthwhile effort to understand what the disconnect is with the other municipalities, just so we know before we can make some kind of a recommendation.
And I think also just
I just want to say one other thing. I'm in agreement, though, that anything we can do to lessen the administrative load and make things easier, right? Whether that's adjusting, we did last time increase to 2,500. If the number is 3,500 or 5,000 or 7,500, that to me is reasonable in terms of as long as we don't impact the revenue to the town. And I will say it is a significant amount of time of money that the permits bring to the town.
$600,000 approximately. Is it? Gary was correct.
And I'm wondering, Bill, if while we look at this, if you could get 2 data points, which is how many permits did we issue that were between $2,000 and $5,000, and how many permits were between $5,000 and $7,000? Because I think those are our data points we're looking at. Are we 3,000? Are we 5,000? Are we 7? Are we 10? I just want to bring to everyone's attention, without any research or data, I believe our $600,000 income is probably driven 90+% by major construction permits exceeding $10,000, $15,000. And, looking at the hard data, which is a $2,000 permit costs $60, a $5,000 permit costs $90, or costs $150. It's a difference of $90. A $7,000 permit costs $200, a difference of $150 from $60. And if we have 300 people getting those, it's a very small amount to have our permitting process and our officials bogged down issuing permits at that level, when probably we're going to have to take on another $50,000 individual to manage these small permits. Then that makes no sense.
Right.
So I don't think we can talk about the income to the town when we are as bogged down as, historically we've been with a lot of these small permits, when our sister cities aren't going there, I think for probably a logical reason of they don't want to be bogged down with something under $7,000 or $5,000, because we, like all of the others, are going to have major construction for the next 5 to 10 years as our lot values are high and increasing. And, nobody buying a $1.5 million lot is keeping the cottage. And so I just think it's relative that at some point we're going to have to hire someone at $50,000 to handle the small permitting. And then I think we're actually in the red.
Our sister
Dave?
property taxes, it covers a lot of that for them. We don't have that. So losing the revenue would be an issue.
It's a big deal.
Well, we are double the permit fee of Lewis. We are 100% higher. And I think if we look, I think another good data point to look at is how have our permit fees changed in the last 5 years, year over year, with new construction, because we are staying that path. And as we get into major construction of, tear downs and full-on blown construction, which we didn't have really 7 years ago. We weren't that mature 7 years ago. Now we've got, full-blown on county construction of homes, of which, quite frankly, at this time, we have 2 houses with construction costs of $7 million. $7 million at 3% is $210,000 per house. So if we're at $600,000 and we have 2 houses in our town that should be paying $420,000 themselves in permit fees, I'm missing something here, because outside of those 2 houses, we have a lot of other houses that are going up for $2-3 million. But there are 2 houses going up for $7 million in construction costs. And if we're not looking at those construction costs, or we don't know that those are the construction costs, we need better monitoring on that, because losing out on 200,000+ in permitting fees for 1 house is a third of our intake in 1 year.
Yeah, what street are those?
I think that's
Okay,
not for a public hearing.
that's fine. That's fine.
But what I'm saying is, most houses, it's very easy to, construction on new builds right now is $275 to $500. $450, $350 is the median. I could name 4 companies that are charging a minimum of $350 to $450 a square foot. So our intake, I think, is low compared to what we have going on in town. And I think we might need to look at some direction in how we manage the reality of those construction costs.
So is a comment, take a look at what the permit fees are, given the value of what we're,
I think the data points, I think when we're looking, the primary thing is we're looking at right now is, do we maintain 2,000 or do we bring it up to 7,000 to get rid of a lot of administrative bottlenecks in getting these permits out and reviewing these permits? And how much would that get rid of? So if we could understand how many permits we have between 2 and 5 and 5 and 7, and it's minimal, then it's kind of a no-brainer. Let's not spin our rails too much.
Right.
Let's just go to 7. But I think the other component is, for a town who doesn't have a tax, we really need to be paying attention to the reality of the new build construction costs. And, seems to me we should be taking in a lot more than 600,000. And I think there's a disconnect there somewhere too. But, we can't just worry about the small projects and the minor permits of individuals doing something for 2,000. We have to equally worry about the ones where people are doing 2, 3, 4, 8 million in construction costs, because when you're putting up houses with steel beams and concrete houses, it's an expensive build.
Chairman, you have Gary and Dawn that's waiting to say something.
Yep, go ahead. Commissioner Persinger?
Well, yeah, just 2 quick points. I mean, I think I said earlier, you could really relieve the administrative burden to a great degree on maybe 40% of the permits that are issued. I looked at over 500 permits, and just for example, there were almost 200 that were less than $10,000 in total construction costs. We don't have any data on material costs that I'm aware of, so you kind of have to guess at what a threshold of $2,500 or $3,500 would mean in terms of total construction costs. But again, I think there's room to move. The other issue with respect to Rehoboth and Lewis and the disconnect there in terms of what's required for permitting, I mean, they're largely not, if at all, they're not in flood zones.
Right.
And so they're not stuck with the same kind of FEMA requirements that we're stuck with in most of the town of Dewey Beach. So we have to be really cognizant of what we do here in Dewey Beach and make sure that, we don't have a situation where there are a bunch of small projects for the same property, that if you add them together over a fairly short period of time, it really turns into a substantial improvement. And then if you don't recognize that, you're not complying with the FEMA requirements. And just one other point, I think we have to recognize this is an important revenue stream. I think there's room to move here, but we can't put at risk the town's financial revenue stream, which is important here, both to the town as a whole in terms of just general revenues, but also to the infrastructure needs that we have. $600,000 is $120,000 that goes to the infrastructure fund each year. So again, important for us.
Dawn, did you want to add to it?
Yes, please. I look at my position as the building official as an advisory position, an advisory role in this capacity. When it comes to financial items and so forth, others are much more qualified to consider the financial basis for the town. However, my requirement or my role is to have the town be in agreement with the federal government through that legal agreement that was back in 1982. So if I can make a suggestion, is for the town to have a conference call with FEMA and ask these questions. I know they do have conference calls. They do have a lot of documentation in a written form. And so that may help give the town a direction in which to think about what can or cannot be done legally and still remain in favor with FEMA, the federal government.
Thank you, Dawn. That's what my thinking was, is that we need to really sit down with FEMA and understand if we can move, what we can do. I think we do need to be aware of the cost implications to the budget. That said, I think there's room here, and I think Commissioner Persinger's put it out there, and we as a group kind of spoke to it with the material costs. So I don't know that we can address what's here in item 2 and 3 here tonight because of the FEMA requirements. So I'm going to suggest we table, or at least, not have or table those items for now until we get more data.
Can I just have one question, David?
Sure.
I really do think the material is a very good point, because I think that there's a lot of lowballing numbers that we get. So it's probably a big amount of revenue, or some revenue that we're missing. But I wanted to ask Dawn and the town manager a question instead of just assuming this. I feel that the service that you provide by getting permits and getting their license, and then also having the gentleman that drives around, enforcer, is a quality control for workmanship in the town that helps, that you don't have a bunch of handymen that are not qualified to be putting in electric, or they're putting in plumbing, and poor workmanship. Do you think that that does provide that service to the town by having these permits at a certain level?
I can just speak to that. I don't think that we all have a role.
Is this Dawn?
No, it's Marcia.
Oh, I wanted to ask, the question was to Dawn, and
okay.
the other ones to Dawn and to Bill, because am I kidding myself, thinking that I'm getting some protection, that the town's got oversight over some of the workmen that are coming in to work in our building?
So I think when somebody comes into the town, gets a business license, we require that they prove that they have insurance. That's about as far, and you and I have had this conversation before, that's as far as the town responsibility is. We don't go out and say we recommend this company or this person to do the work. But, basically we're requiring them to fill out a business license, pay the fee, and show that they have insurance. And that's it. Dawn, am I missing anything?
Yes and no. You are correct with requiring a license. The state of Delaware, we need to know that they are licensed through the state of Delaware, at least a $75 a year license. As far as their insurance company, that's an excellent thing. However, we do not check behind to see whether or not that they are a reputable or they've had a lot of claims and so forth concerning their work. However, the state of Delaware, at least to my knowledge at this time, does not have a home improvement licensing like the state of Delaware does. And so as a result, then it could be that the state of Delaware allows handymen who really are not qualified to be able to do a lot of the construction work. Yet the state of Delaware has as licensing the electrician's license that they get through the state of Delaware is their permit to do whatever work they're doing in that structure. That's the same way with the plumber. Their license through the state of Delaware is their permit to do that work. So the homeowners or property owners need to be checking on this because we, the town, do not do this. It's actually not, we don't have the time and so forth, but this is the way it's been through the state of Delaware since I've been involved with building, which has been a number of years.
Okay, so I guess the point is to this committee is that when we're talking about this is that if you're an electrician, there are laws in the state of Delaware that you're not supposed to be dealing with electricity unless you have a license with the state of Delaware. But there's nobody, I thought that perhaps when they were doing a building permit and they said that they were going, or they were doing their, the permit for putting in air conditioning, that an air conditioning, they'd have to show that they had their license and they put their information, at least take the information down. And so this, everybody knows, everybody, Gary, Bill, and probably Don knows, this is my big issue, that we get Zippo for the permit. Like the permit does, it raises revenue, but it doesn't make me feel very warm and fuzzy about the fact that anybody could be getting a permit, because you can get a insurance for a day, correct? Like a week, and they can give you an insurance number and you're not even looking at it, because we had that. So this is an issue that maybe is a longer conversation, and it's my particular thing that I think that is upsetting, because I don't think your typical consumer realizes the lack of oversight and the lack of that this is just revenue. It's just revenue, because it's not giving me any security. Go ahead, Don.
Isn't it up to the consumer to do their own homework?
100%.
Why are you putting it on the town? I mean, it's up to the consumer to make sure you vet those people.
I agree 100%. I think if you're gonna get into a quality control issue, I don't think there's a state in the United States that has quality control over people that have a permit. I mean, I can go out and get a permit in the state of Delaware to be a handyman or a GC.
Actually, that's not true. You have to have a license in this state. They're just not enforcing it.
Well, a license. I mean, a license is $50.
Group, I'm gonna stop us here because Commissioner Person has a hard stop at 6. So,
That's not that, okay, but I
Right.
do want to clarify something very quickly, is that the state requires anyone working on electric to have a license. They have to be a qualified electrician, a plumber, all of these things they have to be. But we don't require even the paperwork with their actual permit showing that they're doing this. They have this. So, I mean, it would be great if we did that. So I'd be willing to pay that $1,000 if I was getting something out of it. It's just something to consider.
Elaine, I think actually to get a license in Dewey Beach as an electrician, you have to show your state license. So you have to be licensed by the state first. And the state would require the documentation. and then you bring that license to the town of Dewey Beach, and you get a license in the town of Dewey Beach. So I think one of the clarifications is that you can't work, there is no one that can physically work for income, for money, in any of these towns, Rehoboth, Dewey, Lewis, anywhere, no matter what level of a contractor or handyman you are, without a license in the state and the town. But there are no towns that provide oversight, meaning just because I'm a licensed electrician doesn't mean I do quality work, and
Well, that's
doesn't mean I
of
won't screw
course.
up your whole job. There's
That's of
really
course.
no one, I don't think we're ever going to come to an end agreement in this state or any state that state officials or governments are in the position to monitor quality control.
But it's not quality control, but I'll let it go, David. It's about making sure that they actually have license and they're not doing electrical work. I mean, you see a lot of fires recently, and so that was my issue. It's truly, I'd like to talk about it later in maybe another forum.
Okay. Well, here's what I'm going to suggest we do is that we table this item for today. I don't think we're going to get to any kind of resolution. If maybe we could build on, we could maybe do a little research with FEMA between now and the next meeting. I think that would give us some more information.
I will look at the under 5K, over 7K, the funds brought in and how many permits were issued at 5K and 7.
Yeah,
Right.
that would be great.
I think that'd be great. That would help us. So, okay.
And could you, Bill, could you just give us the total dollar amount, like for the year? Like if we had 50 permits issued at, well, I guess we'll have it,
Right,
3%.
he'll get it. He'll have the number and the dollars.
Okay.
Okay, so with that, I'm gonna, any other comments from the public? Okay, I'm gonna close the public meeting. Any other comments from committee members? No? Okay, at this point then, I'm gonna ask for a motion to adjourn.
I motion we adjourn.
Thank you, Jimmy. Second, all right, all in favor? Aye. All right.
I oppose.
the
Thank you,
meeting's-
Dawn.
Thank you, Dawn, thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
I'll be